How did a love story create a death fashion trend? Victorian mourning etiquette was an art form, social expectation, and to some, an example of classism and waste. Mourning attire creates the strongest visual spectacle, today inspiring horror movies instead of trend followers. The reasoning. Little Victoria became queen in 1837 at the age of 18, was coronated in 1838, and married Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, who later took the title of Prince Consort in 1840. The era pioneered technological and socioeconomic changes that we see to this day, much thanks to Albert's progressive, innovative mindset that Victoria endorsed. Victoria and Albert had a once-in-a-lifetime love story. Victoria kept a detailed diary from her girlhood into her later years. She describes meeting Albert at a party in Kensington Palace when they were both 17, a meeting that their uncle, King Leopold of the Belgians, arranged. The pair became instantly smitten with one another. In her diary, Victoria noted Albert's attractive features, a beautiful nose, a sweet mouth with fine teeth. Victoria proposed to Albert in October 1839 during his second visit to Windsor Castle. She and Albert produced 9 children over the years, 5 girls and 4 boys. According to her diary, she and Albert had a passionate, caring love life both in and out of the bedroom. Albert grew ill from stress in 1851, and a series of increasingly immediate health concerns followed until he contracted typhoid fever and passed away in 1861, leaving Victoria and their children alone. Victoria experienced a low that she never recovered from after the death of her beloved, her rock, the one person who understood and saw her as she was. From this moment on, Victoria dressed herself in the formal, deep mourning attire and never took it back off. Simply, when Queen Victoria lost her husband Albert, she went into mourning for the rest of her life. Citizens were eager to follow their queen's commands as well as her trends. Rules such as the set time one was to remain in mourning, and many stages or phases of mourning, which Victoria initially did not allow, only allowing servants to be seen in deep mourning. Color. Black itself was a common fashion color in the Victorian era, predominantly for practical reasons. The air was sooty, smoggy, and the streets were oftentimes covered in filth from horses and humans alike. It made sense to don black, a color that cannot be stained and ruined like pastel or jewel hues. Attire was to be a matte, dead black. Black was indeed highly fashionable and practical at the time, and such standard garments would simply not do. Matte black dyes would leak and nearly permanently dye skin, and many toxic recipes to remove the stains were popularized. They would eventually be allowed to wear subtle colors like mauve in lighter phases of mourning. Fabrics. Crepe and muslin were common, as well as wool. Ladies wore long face veils attached to bonnets to limit social interaction. People were to leave them to grieve. As they phased into lighter stages of mourning, the veil shortened. The material later changed as it caused illness and breathing troubles. Imagine dying from your efforts to mourn. This was not unheard of. Accessories, mementos, and traditions. Accessories depended on the stage of mourning. While some stages prohibited or frowned upon jewelry, others allowed for understated, dark-themed pieces. A personal favorite of mine is a trend that is not limited to the Victorian era. The trend of memento mori resurfaced in popularity during the Victorian era, a reminder that death is always near. People held on to photos of the deceased, whether they were alive or dead, aka postmortems, and body parts of the deceased were incorporated into sentimental objects to immortalize them, so to say. A mourning art trend that originated in 17th century England, hair was woven into many accessories, such as brooches, necklaces, bracelets, and lockets, or even large wreaths and family trees. Additionally, tear bottles, aka lacrimatory bottles, collected tears from the day of the funeral. These were typically poured onto the grave on the anniversary of their death. The list of traditions and funerals included covering mirrors to prevent the deceased spirit from getting trapped, as well as giving or planting flowers. Because, of course, flowers played a central role in funerals. Pink carnation to say, "I'll never forget you," red poppy for consolation, purple hyacinths for sorrow, dark crimson roses for mourning, and the list could go on for ages. The Victorians had a sophisticated, complex language through the giving or planting of flowers that deserves a video all of its own. However, because this video is about attire, let us return to the original subject matter. Stages. I keep saying stages of mourning, light mourning, deep mourning. What does this mean? The strictest of mourning began with deep mourning. This is what we see in horror films using mourning attire, typically. Widows would wear this for 2 years after the death of their husband. This is where dull, dead, solid black fabrics such as crepe, muslin, or wool were a must. Jewelry was a controversial subject, so many opted to avoid it at all. Ordinary mourning allowed for more variety in the type of black one was allowed to wear. The fabric could now include silk, and ornamentation such as jet beading was introduced. Modest, minimal jewelry was now permitted as well. In the above stages, leaving the house or receiving visitors was restricted. Another note is that the undergarments remained white for practical reasons. Now, half mourning, colors are somewhat reintroduced. Clothing could be trimmed with gray, purple, lilac, mauve, or white. Too, they could receive visitors in their homes or be seen outside. Some customs varied depending on the relationship to the deceased, age, sex, and region. For example, if a daughter was mourning a parent, she must stay to herself for 6 weeks and not accept invitations to social outings for 6 months or longer. Regional differences. Attire varied regionally, England and France leading the macabre fashion trends. America with no specific attire. Many individuals were unable to afford it, wearing normal clothes or depending on charity. Many believe purchasing such extravagant clothing for mourning was wasteful and an example of classism. Even in the States, the customs and attire varied. For example, Godey's magazine, volume 54 in 1857, stated that ladies in Pennsylvania kept their veils longer and shutters closed for longer than the ladies of New York or Boston. Variations. We've spoken about ladies' mourning wear. What about the gents, the children? Mourning traditions predominantly focused on women, and it was like a show for others to see the woman proving her devotion to the deceased by respecting the established mourning traditions of her time, region, relationship to the deceased, and her status. Men's wear barely changed, as it was already predominantly black. A dark suit, black gloves, hat band, cravat. Perhaps they could wear a black armband unless they lost their wife. More unique options were adorning a weeper, which was a long crepe band on their hat to indicate their relationship to the deceased. The width of the weeper represented the relationship. As an example of the amazingly creative uses of hair to commemorate the dead back in the day, they could wear a pocket watch fob, partially made of the deceased hair. For timing, husbands only mourned their wives for 3 months, but could still attend social events and conduct business. So realistically, you just see the lad in a black wool suit during the funeral process, then he'd return to life. We need justice for our lads. Imagine being some brooding goth during this era, and you don't get to mope about while all of your feminine counterparts do. As for children, they remained in white, but it was common to add black trim during times of mourning. Modern times and the association of black. While when we think of funerals, we still mentally associate the color black with the event, formal, dark, solemn. However, the further removed from the Victorian era that we are, the less we see these customs, even abandoning the rule of dressing in black. With every funeral that I go to, I see more and more people wearing whites or pastels, or even wearing the deceased's favorite color. I propose that we are going full circle with the association of black. It is not solely a sad, funerary tone. The color black has represented other things such as protection, particularly when paired with a veil, for centuries. What do you think of mourning attire? What did you find the most interesting about it? Do you find it too sad, dark, or unattractive? Personally, I find that it is beautifully crafted and meaningful, but this is coming from an armchair historian that almost went to mortuary school. Take care, my friends, and happy Halloween.